Over 200 experts have shared their secrets to a successful business. Join me, Rose Davidson, as I discover how these experts took their businesses to the next level.
Talking with the experts.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. Talking about all things business by business owners for business owners. Episode 260 with Brian Asingia.
I usually call it my MBA experience, even though I've since gone on to do an MBA. But I suddenly felt like working on Wall Street was an eye-opener, to say the least. I mean, looking at companies that have been in existence for hundreds of years, celebrating their 100-year anniversary and ringing the bell. And it's to rub shoulders and like pick brains with the people who work there. It's an incredible experience. Just like living in New York is an incredible experience because there's all these talented people. But I do think that for me, what it showed me, and again, cognizant of my background coming from Uganda in East Africa, what struck me the most was, yes, these are incredible organizations that are celebrating success, but that success was not overnight, that it had taken decades of planning, decades of consistent innovation, consistent leadership, consistent community engagement, depending on the service being offered, to then achieve that 100-year success. You don't get to 100 years without surviving 10 years or 50.
Talking with the experts.
Hello, and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And talking about YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ding on that bell so you get notified when new videos are uploaded. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Today my guest is Brian Asingia. Sorry, I beg your pardon. He is the chairman and CEO of the Pearl Dream Incorporated, and we're going to be discussing ethical leadership and inclusive innovation in a cashless society, which is where I imagine the world will be going sooner rather than later. Welcome, Brian, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Rose.
Yes, so you are the author of The Last Digital Frontier and Cashless Society 101. Can you just let us know a little bit about what the book's about?
Sure. So the themes in The Last Digital Frontier, which is my first book, are kind of looking at innovation in Africa, both historical, colonial, and post-colonial innovation. I felt like I'm originally from Uganda, so that was written originally from like an African perspective. And then I extend some of the themes, which I'll mention in a second, into my second book, Cashless Society 101, to have this much more global perspective. And in short, I'll start by defining cashless society, and then I'll talk about the four themes, and we can dig deeper from there. So cashless society has two definitions. One is the technical definition that's been around since the 60s, which basically says it's a society that prefers electronic transactions over fiat or cash or paper-based transactions. Now, a clarification is it is not limited to cash. It is not limited to financial transactions. This now includes electronic health records, telemedicine. I just had an appointment with my doctor today. Somehow he was stuck in traffic. We had it over video and it was still successful. So it includes all these other electronic transactions we now have, from ordering food to virtual weddings, I suppose one could say. It's really a little bit of everything in there. The second definition is the philosophical definition, which I added more from a personal experience, again, having grown up in Uganda and kind of seeing corruption all around me happening through cash facilitations, which basically poses a question of what does the world look like when we put cash at the end of our sort of thought process? What is a world without cash? Can you continue to share value? Can we continue to have these intellectual discussions, learn from one another, build communities without cash being the front and perhaps the end of all our ambitions and plans? So basically, the argument there then becomes that there is inherent value in things, in experiences, in resources, in opportunities before you even sell them. And so we need to be very, very careful in nurturing and utilizing resources we already have, rather than always waiting for an external validator to assign value to something based on how much cash they can pay for it. So that's really sort of the second philosophical argument. And then I suppose really quickly, I know you have lots of questions coming up. The four themes that I then tackle are identity, which can tackle digital identity, but also cultural identity, ownership, both the traditional sort of here's your deed for the land, but we can now talk about fractional ownership in this new electronic medium where you can, electronically, again, divide ownership almost to a precise fraction, and almost be guaranteed that that contract will be honored because it's a machine now doing the distribution, not a fallible human being who may take the proceeds for themselves. Trust is a bigger one, obviously, as an extension. And then again, trust is both human to human trust, but also human to, I suppose, machine or counterparty, because oftentimes we don't know who we are sending the electronic transaction to. If you think of digital payment apps, I don't know what they use in Europe, but or other areas, but in the US right now, I think people are familiar with PayPals and Venmos and Cash Apps, where it's a peer-to-peer transaction. And oftentimes you don't know who the counterparty is, but you trust and you send the money. So trust will continue to be important. And then finally, scale. And scale for me just means access. So how do we design systems that a lot of people can access, regardless maybe of connectivity challenges, financial challenges? Again, sort of trying to take the cash out of the equation, so it's not necessarily decided by your economic background.
Wow, that is very interesting. Because I thought a cashless society meant just no money, no folding paper and no coins. That was my idea of a cashless society, where we would just be using electronic transactions, credit cards, that sort of a thing, to transact our everyday life. I mean, I was always brought up to believe that cash was a dirty word, money was a dirty word.
Good parents then. I wish I was told that. I do think that suddenly there is that. I've had some pretty strong resistance, I would say, from people who would say, "Oh, I love cash in my pockets. I love to feel the cash." And then, I think to those I always respond, you just love the feel of some cash. You don't go around carrying all your cash in your pocket. Suddenly you wouldn't have a lot of money if that was possible.
I can't remember the last time I had any money in my wallet. I transaction everything over the internet. I think I can keep a track better using electronic payments, because I can say, well, I've got this much money in the bank, I can only spend this much money. Where if I've got folding money in my wallet, I think, oh God, I've overspent and I haven't saved enough for the essentials. So I much prefer electronic banking than cash money. Where my husband's the absolute opposite, because he's such a technophobe and is very old fashioned. He reckons money's made flat to stack, and I reckon it's made round to go round. So
so you balance it out. I suppose you're both you'll survive the apocalypse if it ever happens.
Absolutely,
He'll
absolutely.
have some cash left in the wallet when the machines crash, I suppose.
That's it.
Um,
Absolutely.
he'll stay.
You
Go
were
ahead.
you were an analyst on Wall Street for
Sure.
a number of years. How
Mhm.
um, what made you decide to leave? That great. Well, to me, I would imagine would be a great
Absolutely.
job to become an author advisor and an investor.
Yeah, I usually call it my MBA experience, even though I've since gone on to do an MBA. But I suddenly felt like working on Wall Street was an eye opener, to say the least. I mean, looking at companies that have been in existence for hundreds of years, celebrating their 100-year anniversary and ringing the bell, and it's to rub shoulders and like pick brains with the people who work there. It's an incredible experience. Just like living in New York is an incredible experience because there's all these talented people. But I do think that for me, what it showed me, and again, cognizant of my background coming from Uganda in East Africa, what struck me the most was, yes, these are incredible organizations that are celebrating success, but that success was not overnight, that it had taken decades of planning, decades of consistent innovation, consistent leadership, consistent community engagement, depending on the service being offered, to then achieve that 100-year success. You don't get to 100 years without surviving 10 years or 50, just like in marriage. And so I felt like, yeah, as a young person straight out of college, um, I wasn't just going to be hungry or satisfied by being at the mountaintop. Rather, I looked at it as an opportunity to, having seen a glimpse of the future of what's possible 50 years from now, and that it would be better use of my time if I went back to the past or to the beginning and almost tried to build something or help people build things. And that's kind of what I did literally. It's been an incredible 5 or 6 years ever since. But we've built an education and media distribution platform. I now work with a lot of other emerging entrepreneurs across Africa, Asia. And I think it's exciting to understand that you can be part of innovation without being the lead innovator, that we can each contribute in our own unique ways to innovation without being the big brains behind the idea. So the more I do that, the more exciting it gets, because it means I get to sleep better because I don't have to stay awake being responsible for an idea. But I do think, like, yes, the exchange is an incredible place. It helps a lot of companies, organizations access capital. But realistically, I felt like the career growth was going to be limited because I was already reporting to senior vice presidents, and I didn't see them going anywhere in 5 or 10 years. So I wouldn't, it was hard to see myself in the same role for another 5 or 10 years.
Have you been thinking about starting a podcast? You can share your knowledge and expertise with people globally. Create original content that is completely unique from anything else out in today's market, not just in terms of style, but also perspective. And when we talk about revenue generating potential, well, let me tell you, it doesn't stop there. The time to start is now. You know that you should be doing it. However, many people are reluctant because they don't know how to produce it or what tools they need to do their podcast. Please feel free to email me at guest@talkingwiththeexperts.com today, and let's talk about how I can help you to build authority and credibility for your business through podcasting. Remember, don't wait for the opportunity, create it. Yeah, I can imagine that being at the stock exchange would have been, or it being in Wall Street, full stop, would be such a challenging and stressful place to be, because
It is.
It's the heart of the world, the money world, basically, isn't it? If Wall Street crashes, the rest of the world is in heaps of trouble.
Yeah. And it's a very, I call it very adrenaline based kind of role, whether you work on the trading floor or not, because ultimately, which especially for us who were designing and maintaining the systems. So I was sort of a middleman between business and the technology people. If something was wrong, then they would come running back to you and go, why didn't the machine work? And so you'd have to have answers to that. And so whether you were trading or not, you were still part of the equation that had to make sure the transactions went through, that they were secure, that there was no glitches. And on top of that, sometimes they didn't even tell us, it's actually one of the most targeted locations for sort of terrorist kind of activity. And so often I would get messages from my family saying, are you okay? We're seeing something on the news. And I go, what do you mean? I'm working. Because they won't tell you, because they don't want you to panic, because it happens so often that there's just no use telling you every time that there's a threat. And so, I'm not saying that was really the reason for leaving, but it was always like an interesting place to be. But the excitement came with a lot more, I want to say, heightened anxiety, that you suddenly had to stay on your toes, both to make sure systems were operating the right way, or you're tracking people's money. And then you also had to worry about your own welfare as well. So I think I like the suddenly much more relaxed sort of consulting lifestyle or private equity lifestyle, where you can engage organizations and institutions as needed, rather than having a consistent hyperactive sort of schedule.
Yeah, I guess, that sort of leads into, Wall Street. You hear about, the Wolf of Wall Street, and, you hear
Sure.
about all the unethical behavior that happens within, the stock exchange and all those sorts of places. How can we bring ethics back into, our money dealings?
Yeah. And I think, ideas are planted small and they grow. I felt like when I was there, I had an interesting conversation with one of the vice presidents where, she was almost an informal mentor. So somebody I would have lunches or dinners, or occasional walks with, to pick her brain. And she had been there over 10 years. So really knew her way around the organization. So one of the things I shared with her was, I'm struggling with this concept of fitting in, into the Wall Street culture, which had certain demands or made certain things. Either it could be cutting shortcuts, or really not, as you put it, maybe caring for the average person. And so you had to keep your eye on the money, literally, and not worry about other concerns, ethical or otherwise, that might come in the way. And I remember her sort of sharing that she understood how I felt, and that I need not feel pressured to be like everybody else, because that was not the requirement for success, that you could still be a good person and be successful. You didn't have to be mean. You didn't have to be sort of unethical in so many ways to succeed in life. And I felt like it was a good, reassuring statement that part of the reason I wrote the book was to explore that conversation deeper, to say, is it still worthwhile to do the right thing in a world that maybe fantasizes and exaggerates and idealizes what I might call quick success, or greed is good. I'm sure we've seen all these movies that idealize capitalism. So how do we get back to prioritizing ethics? I think we're already going there. It starts with us. It starts with what I call values-based kind of lifestyles, values-based leadership, values-based decision-making. So we're seeing globally a huge movement. Obviously, if we think of food, people now care where the food is coming from and how it's prepared, or how it's grown or raised, if we're talking livestock versus food. What ingredients or let's say fertilizers are used on the farm. People care. When we talk about business and resources, people want to know where the diamonds are coming from. Are they blood diamonds or not? So when we talk about energy, is it renewable or not? Are you helping save the environment? So I think these concerns are no longer far-fetched. And the reason the electric car Teslas of the world, or everybody now wants to build a Tesla. When, by the way, if you look at the history of innovation, the electric car was killed more times than we need to remember. I
Electric
think
cars or similar have been around since before, forever, and they've been, because the petrol or gas companies, don't want to lose their foothold in the world of riches. They keep
it's the fear of change. Yeah,
doing
they don't want
stuff, to sabotage the electric
to.
car industry. And I think innovation of that type is just, it's amazing. And I think, there's got to be more innovation like that in the world. And it is coming more to the fore, because you're right, people do care about where things are coming from now. I mean, you look back to the 60s when, all the hippies were around and everything, and it started about that time, but it just took a really long time for the world to catch up, I guess, to those people that were already
crazy
in that mind mode.
Yeah. And I suppose maybe they had the right idea. Maybe they weren't living their ideas, right? I think I'm not criticizing the overall movement of the era, obviously. I'll leave that for historians. But I do think that when I'm talking about the values now, I'm saying this generation, our generation, your generation, my generation, even the people coming after us, the last 10, 20 years, there seems to be an intentionality of people forsaking school, of people dropping out, of people sacrificing something to do the very thing they care about. And there's almost like a nobility, if nobility was ever a thing, in that's increasingly becoming, if not publicly celebrated, it's personally valued for those that choose that path. And then society is awakening to that and say, wow, here's an individual that risked so much and came up with something. Okay, we ought to support more of that. And governments are coming up and saying, how do we find more of these individuals and support them? So I think the caring followed by action, or followed by that belief of, this is what I want, this is the world that I will hope to have, or the kind of business I want to run. One of the examples I share in the book is this Chobani CEO is a Greek immigrant here in the US, started a yogurt company. And then 2006 decides to give company shares to his employees, which was an incredible gesture. Didn't have to do it, but it felt like it was the right thing to do. So I argue that in the future, fractional ownership or employee-owned corporations will really increasingly become the norm. Certainly, you'll always have your conglomerates and monopolies. They're not going away without a fight. But I think it will be increasingly easier for cooperatives, college students, artists, to really form an institution and write the digital contracts or smart contracts through which they can share the profits or dividends from that venture without requiring a lot of legal paperwork, because you and I both know lawyers are not cheap. And if your computer can in the future be your personal lawyer, that may change a lot of things for most of us, because often we do not understand the legal and accounting complexity of doing business online.
Yeah, it's a scary world, being cyber, to do everything. Cyber security is such a big issue. You've got these hackers and scammers and spammers and all sorts of things, and it's so hard if you don't have all your security in place on your laptop or your desktop or your phone. You're so open to being scammed and spammed by these horrible people that want to take advantage of others, and it's quite scary, really. It's becoming more prevalent, unfortunately.
It's becoming more prevalent, and that's an important one, actually. So when we did talk about trust as one of the core themes, I mentioned how cybersecurity is becoming this national concern now, so much so that the US will say, oh, we don't like this Chinese application because it's a national security threat. And China will say, we don't trust Google applications in China because it's a national threat. So we might end up having two versions of the internet. Uh, and I think I used another example on a podcast. It's not in the book, but it's something I've come up with to help explain the concept. If I'm sending you money, I might have to pause and ask you, which internet are you on? Are you on the Chinese one or not? In which case, I might have to do something extra to switch over. And I feel like the fact that we are pausing to ask that question, which is likely in the near future, it already is, depending on which application you're downloading, they may not be available in certain app stores. So my point is the fact that we now pause to ask, what country are you in or which internet are you using? That wasn't the whole idea of the internet. It was supposed to connect us and allow us to cross borders and cultures. And I think that we can go back to the original idea of the internet, but we need to push for those values of connectivity and inclusion that seem to be being pushed aside in the name of national security or security in general.
Yes.
And that's a dangerous path as well from a government perspective that I think they're ruining the party for most of us.
Absolutely. 1984, or Big Brother and all that sort of thing is, it's becoming more right. It's becoming more rife. It is. It's just the analogies in that particular book have just, what he predicted is astoundingly becoming truth.
Yeah. So I'm curious what you think of governments, because somebody asked, does a cashless society mean no more governments?
No, you gotta have government.
I don't think so. You gotta have government, right? But
yeah.
You'll always, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So, I'm absolutely not for tax evasion or anything like that. I'm just saying, when you digitize systems, you save about 80% of the cost.
Absolutely.
Just by going electronic. Like you mentioned, I like to see my usage habits. Where am I spending my money? Because the bank, if it's electronic, it's going to give you that pie chart or that summary view. I would never track it that way with cash. So I can know exactly where to cut if I need to save a little bit more money.
Well, who's going to sit at a spreadsheet if you got cash? I spent 5 cents here and I spent 10 cents here, and then load it into a spreadsheet so you get this beautiful graph. Why bother? It's time consuming when you can just do online banking and it does it all for you, and it's Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle. It's done. Exactly. So I think those little things like I think for the last year, as a matter of an experiment, as I was writing the book, I challenged myself to go fully cashless. I'll admit there's been instances where I've cheated. That's because some stores still do cash only. So I'll be like, oh, here we go. We have to go get that cash. But overall, New York City subway system, the train system, public transit system, you can swipe electronically with your card, with your phone.
Same here.
So
Same
I've been surprised and actually encouraged, like you said, to see this become a reality. Obviously COVID was a bad thing, but I think it's helped accelerate some of the adoption of these technologies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, COVID is as a an illness is yeah, you're right. It's not a good thing, but it's brought forward so much. I mean, Zoom was a platform that was used, but now it's just like it's our reality now. This is how families would speak to each other, and when they were in lockdown and whatever, and Zoom has just had to improve themselves in such a short space of time. That so that we can all connect with each other, and it's just the way of the future. Electronic everything, I think, but it's data privacy and cybersecurity, which is still a major issue, I believe.
Yeah, well, I think it will get better with time. I think a lot because thanks to government pressure on one hand, saying this is now a national security mandate, businesses are realizing that they can either be fined or they're now monitored a little bit more closely. And so they're putting in a little bit more extra work to actually try to protect information. I think right now Microsoft is trying to buy a cybersecurity company to bolster its security. Google is, I think, rolling out some kind of passwordless login system, because a lot of times people forget their passwords, or they create the easiest passwords, 0123, that are easy to hack. And so continuing to use different ways to access systems, whether it's your fingerprint or your eye or biometrics, these will continuously be options. But I suppose I was curious also what you thought about, do you feel like there's a resistance? You did mention your husband is more paper.
I think it's the older generation. It's the baby boomers who are, just so set in their ways. I think they're the ones that are resisting. But anyone, past, born in the 80s, 90s, when the internet first became a thing, it's just part of a way of life now. And then they adapt to changes and innovations. I think it's easier for them.
Yeah, because in a way, you're right. There's people that do not remember cassette tapes, or all they've had is the internet and songs online. So the concept of having like a limited storage or limited, actually scarcity, one could argue, even though it's still there online, is actually not really there, because it used to be you could be limited to 10 songs at a time. That was it, and you had to rewind. So I do think that when we think of the like you said, the evolution of technology and how many more people have access to that technology, because the last 10 years I've seen a lot more people come online. The resistance, I suppose we could say, is inevitable, is mute. But I think there's reason for caution, right? I'm not saying let's go tech all the way and trust it completely. Data privacy, you mentioned, becomes a big thing, especially for health records, financial records. One area I criticize, and I don't know, you can tell me about where you are, the way the credit system works here. Historically, based on data that was biased, so certain demographics of people had more advantageous access to loans and bank loans, and therefore they had great credit backgrounds. If you think of, if you're an international student or an immigrant, you tend to not really have that credit history that's needed to thrive in a credit banking system.
I think they're getting better at it though, because
they're definitely improving. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I could sit here and discuss this with you all day. Brian, where can people find you if they want to know more or want to work with you?
Sure. The easiest place to find me is the website, brianasingia.com, BrianAsingia. And the social media, or Instagram, Twitter, is the same, at Brian Asingia. Perfect.
And where can they find your books?
The free ebook is already on the website, brianasingia.com. The print paperback version comes out March. So this is pre-sale tour, as I like to call it. People can go check out the free ebook, and then I suppose in 2 weeks or more, we'll be rolling out the print version.
Oh, congratulations. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess just in closing, what would you advise our listeners and viewers, to help, either have a good day or help them better with their, leadership, ethically wise or morally, or, or be more inclusive?
Yeah, I would say, I suppose 2 things really quickly. Agency, your decisions matter, so choose wisely. And I would say second is the power of collaboration and partnerships. So once you know what you want to do and what you value, communicate those values with another person so that you're not compromising your values when you're interacting with them. respect comes when other people acknowledge what you care about and support you in that endeavor, or help you, live your own values. And I think that could be the new way to go about business and life, to fight for the things we care about.
That's great advice, because I think we need a lot more of those people sharing what they value and what their ethics and morals are, to make the world a better place.
Sure.
All right, Brian, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward. Maybe we can have this discussion again later after the book's been launched. That'd be great.
Yeah, would love that. Yeah, I would love that.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day, night, whatever it is where you are.
Night. It's midnight in New York, but it will be morning soon. Well, I suppose it's the next day already. I'm in the future.
It is, yes. I'm just about to go and have my dinner.
Bon appetit.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Talking with the experts.